Well, well, well. Finally, someone admitted the truth. I love it when that happens. Let's go ahead and cut right into the article for today. Loyalty is dead. AT&T CEO John Stansky, his viral memo says the quiet part out loud about the broken state of the corporate workplace. It hits different when it comes from a man like this. At least now we know that A, that's kind of the whole point, and B, it's now an open secret. And again, my name is Jack. Welcome to Sentinel Circle. Thank you for being here today. So this is an article by Business Insider. It's paywalled, so that's why we're looking at the archive. In case you're wondering. So, it's not every day that a CEO's 2,500 word response to an employee engagement survey goes viral. But that's exactly what happened last weekend after AT&T CEO John Stansky sent a memo to his managers that my colleagues Dominic Retter and Catherine Lee published for the entire internet to see. So this is a response, and my video is a response to the response. Upon first reading it, I laughed at just how blunt Stansky was in his admonishment of his staff who apparently complained in the company's survey. Here goes another executive lashing out at frustrated employees, I thought. But the more times I read it, the more I saw something deeper. Perhaps the clearest attempt yet by a major CEO to write the terms of the workplace in contemporary corporate America. Last year, in an essay about the changing relationship between employers and employees, I argued that decades of layoffs, slash benefits, and hardline management killed off our long-held norms about workplace loyalty. This is my shocked face. But I have never heard the head of a large corporation actually admit that. Now, here was Stansky, the CEO of a 140-year-old company. Oh dear. That, oh, that could have ended the video right then and there. You would have seen me in a new shirt after that. For those of you who are not watching but listening, I took a sip of coffee, and not only did it almost go down the wrong pipe, but it got stuck. And oh my God, that could have been like just everywhere, all over the keyboard, the screen. Woo! Let me catch my breath. Woo, boy. I'm sorry. Ooh, that really hurt my chest. Okay, so back to what I was saying. Now, here was Stansky, the CEO of a 140-year-old company that once epitomized corporate loyalty, declaring the death of loyalty himself. Some of you may have stated that you tour with this company expecting an employment deal rooted in loyalty, he wrote. We have consciously shifted away from some of these elements. Consciously shifted away from some of these elements, like employment deal rooted in loyalty. Gee, I wonder. That employment deal Stansky reference is known by another name in organizational psychology, the psychological contract. As I wrote last year, it's the set of things that employers and employees believe they owe each other and are owed in return. And this is a very good point. This is very psychological. A lot of people think that, and even the people that sit there and say you don't owe the company anything. I'm one of those people that sits there and says that, and yet there's this psychological need to justify things like sticking around with the company. Like a lot of people probably don't know, and I probably shouldn't be saying this out loud, but I'm probably gonna start looking for a new job. because of how poorly I've been treated by said company. But it really wasn't the company's fault. It was more the management's fault. A lot of the managers that I had, my first manager was great, but the three after that was not that good. And I hate to say this, but I strongly believe that you don't quit a company, you quit managers. I really do believe that now. But I will say this. I think in the case of two, they both are cut from the same cloth, and that's corporate. Because I've never had managers treat me this badly before. Never. And I'm kind of over it. I don't know what's going to happen after that. I got to really think about this, but yeah, like I said, I think my term at my current company is coming to a close, and quickly. I'm hoping to get through this move first. But we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. Like I said, I'm not going to sit there and talk badly about anything, or anybody, I should say. But certain things have woken me up, and I don't like that feeling when it's. I'm sorry for the tangent. I really am, but like a coworker was fired in a way that I feel was not proper. And not only that, but the treatment he's received post-firing, I've seen it before. It's happened to me. The company has sent out emails saying, don't talk to this person if you're ever approached, which let me put it this way. If I'm getting an email from my company, my boss's boss saying, don't talk to this person outside of work, where does he come off? Seriously, where does he come off telling me how to live my life outside of fucking work? Sorry for the language. I'm so sick and tired of that. I am so angry over it. How a company can just sit there and tell me how to live my life. The moment I'm clocked off, it's nobody's business what I do in my own time. Nobody's freaking business. And yet, I constantly get emails saying how I must conduct myself after work, how I must conduct myself. The hell with all of you. Okay, rant over. But it's just, they got a picture of the guy. A picture of the guy, and it says no entry allowed in threatening red letters with multiple exclamation marks right at the front door. If they were so scared of him, why don't they hire security? Like they seriously think he's just going to show up and break into the building, obviously, or he's going to cause some kind of. And this is what I'm talking about. Is they. When it comes to people in power, they use terms like, oh, he's saying scary things or he's coming off as threatening or whatever. They want a police response because the moment the police get involved, everybody starts looking at this other dude thinking that he's a threat, that he's dangerous, whatever. Like almost in a way like he's going to shoot up a business or a school or something. They did it to me. When I was running, they made it seem like I was the boogeyman. And the reason for that is it's psychological. We don't want to associate with people who are in those positions. And it really, really bothers me that it's so common. So when anybody sits there and says, well, you shouldn't talk to that person, he's a dangerous threat, I don't listen to them. Because again, it's happened to me, and what it is, it's a way to shut down debate. Like when we had the town halls several years ago, during the big coof, where parents started finding out what their kids were really learning in schools. So they started showing up to the school board meetings, and then the cops were showing up and arresting people. That's that kind of stuff. That's what it boils down to. It just shuts down debate. It shuts down everybody's reasonable and logical arguments. And then we have complete chaos. It goes completely against Robert's rules of what was it? It's Robert's rules of meetings or something like that. It completely goes against it. You know, these freaking people, and it's not just our nationally elected representatives. It's local representatives. I mean, I'm going to hammer on this all the freaking time. Know your local representatives. Learn about them. Because they're typically worse than the national ones. The national ones, they can't get away with it. But the local ones run around and act as if they're kings and queens. What right do they have over us, my friends? What right? Because they win an election? God. They can take that election and, you know, wipe my rear with it. They're nothing, my friends. Nothing. You know? Yeah, okay, they may have some kind of impressive resume. Oh, I do this, I do that, whatever. You know, forgive me that I work 60-hour weeks. And I can't do those things. You know? I like to get my feet off the ground because my feet are constantly in pain. No, it's not from diabetes. It's the way I drive. Anyways, I'm sorry I went off that tangent, but it's just like I get so sick and tired of this kind of crap. You know, and again, I'm trying my hardest not to swear. I want people to listen to this at work, but we're gonna do something about that. Anyways, what was he doing here? Okay, here we go. As I wrote last year, it's the set of things that employers, employees, I already read that. Usually these beliefs go unsaid. They're more inferred by the totality of a company's culture. This is true. What's unusual about Sansky's, though, is that he goes on at length, making the implicit explicit. So basically, he's wording it out. He's putting a pen to paper on this one. Telling employees what they're right to expect from the company and what they aren't. Stansky says his workers deserve a transparent career path, a functional office, and the proper tools to do their job. I think that's fair, honestly, because when the tools don't work, and I'm only talking about the tools in this case, when the tools don't work, and I am expected to work with those tools, it really drives me up a wall because I know people have been fired because the tools don't work. But he says they're wrong to expect promotions based on tenure. Okay. The flexibility to work from home and something about conformance. Is that conformance? Yes. That I can't decipher for the life of me. Most of all, he says, don't expect loyalty. So let's break this down. And I'm not going to read this dude's statement. I'll find it and I'll post it, but I'm not going to read it. Because I've quite frankly heard this before. Whatever he says is crap. Let's just not beat around the bush about it. Whatever he says, it's probably true, but it's crap. So it says here, they're wrong to expect promotions based on tenure. I agree with that there. You should not be promoted because of tenure. You should be promoted because you deserve the promotion. Okay, because if you're just there doing the worst job, but you're the most senior person there and you get promoted, like, no. That's what a bureaucracy does. And what he's saying is we're not a bureaucracy. I get that. The ability or the flexibility to work from home, I don't agree with the work from home stuff. But that's simply because, like, there are certain jobs out there that you can't work from home. So why should the people that sit there at adult daycare get the luxury of working from home? You know, but maybe that's a boomer take, and you know what? If that's a boomer take, I'm a boomer. Like, shoot me. You know. Sorry, shouldn't say shoot me. No, but seriously though, I don't like the whole work from home thing because, like, the way I see it is if I can't work from home, And I know that's very selfish of me, but if I can't work from home, nobody else should be able to work. Like a bus driver can't work from home. A maintenance person can't work from home. A plumber, an electrician, they all can't work from home. Their home is, or their office is usually the van that they're driving in, or the bus that they're driving in, or whatever. So what makes the people that work in the office special enough to work from home? Seriously, why should they have that privilege? Because they work a job that requires them to sit in front of a computer all day? Like, seriously, what? What gives them that right? I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, Jack's gone completely off the rails. But no, I'm dead serious here. What gives them that right? I know people that work in an office and they sit there all day. Like my friend, he's an engineer. He's an electrical engineer. He sits in the office all day. A lot of times he's doing nothing. But he has to maintain billable hours by sitting in there all day. He doesn't have the option to work from home. And I've told him many times, just bring a book, learn something, do something. You'll find something to do. If it were me, I'd be working on my own projects. But what gives them the right? Because, that's the one thing I've seen is people who work in an office, they get the ability to work from home. Right? They're paid the 40 hours, but they work like 10-hour day or 10-hour weeks or something. And then the rest is free income. And then there's the whole phenomenon where people were working 2 jobs and still had time. Meanwhile, I'm struggling in my job to maintain all the infrastructure so that way you could do that stuff at home. I didn't get a pay raise and I wasn't able to work a second job and do nothing all day. When it comes to employment, it just upsets me. These people talk about working from home as if it's some right that they have. No, they don't have the right to that. Nobody has that right. If your company wants to do it, great, go apply for that job. Sorry, I know we're already 17 minutes in on this one. If there's one thing Stansky gets right in the memo, it's his attempt to spell out these expectations. Yes, by putting pen to paper, I think that's apt. This shift from what he calls a familial culture that takes care of its employees to a market-based one has been going on since the 1980s. That's actually a good way of putting it. Familial culture to market-based. I like that. That's a very good way of putting it. The days of lifetime job security and pensions are long gone, but CEOs have rarely acknowledged the change because they've gotten a lot of hard work out of their staff who still believe they'll be taken care of in return. To a point, yeah. At least Stansky is clear. He won't even pretend to be loyal to his workers. The first step to repairing the broken psychological contract in today's workplace is having an open conversation about what those new expectations exactly are. And honestly, Stansky, wow, I'm lagging a little bit. Okay. Well, I'm sorry about that. I may have to shut down OBS after this. Sometimes when I record a little too much, OBS gets funky. At least I will agree. At least he came up and said that. I can't begin to tell you how many times I've heard, oh, we're family. And they drop you at the first chance of, or the first sign of bad times ahead. I've seen it. I've never gone through it myself, but I've seen other people go through it, and it really upsets me. I am a full proponent of do your job, walk away. As soon as you get a new job, stay there for 6 months, start looking for a new job. Because, look, our society crumbles when we don't have stability. And that's what we are struggling with right now. We don't have stability. Like, I constantly preach about how I've always wanted stability, and I've never had stability in my entire life. Like, I've moved around a lot. I went to different schools. I mean, there was until sixth grade, I went to a new school every single year. I was the news kid in the school every single year for 6 years. And then in my high school, I went to a new school for my senior year of high school. Oh, and I was in a new school for my freshman year as well. So with the exception of 4 years, I was in a different school every single year. Every single year. You know, and they sit there and say that kids need stability. Kids need, they like home ownership provides stability, and going to the same school provides stability. Because apparently, if you have a stable childhood, then you're a rock star. This is the point here: is if your parents can't work at the same job day in and day out, that creates instability in the home, and unstable children in the home tend to act out more. That's why I'm bringing this up. This CEO here, like, okay, fine, you know, whatever. The dude's a piece of trash. Okay, you know, he's stating the obvious, but at the same time, he's a piece of trash for saying it. But this is the whole point here: is everybody is unstable, and the lack of stability is affecting Maslow's hierarchy. You know, we're constantly worried if we're going to have a job at the end of the week. We're constantly worried if we're going to be able to put food on the table. We're constantly worried about this, that, and the other. And in a way, I think it's by design. I think it's by design, but at the same time, I think this was, I don't know if everybody knows the drop in the bucket theory, which is everybody's putting a drop in the bucket thinking that it's not going to overspill. And then the last person puts the drop in the bucket and then the whole thing spills over. I really think that that's what this is everyone's putting a drop in the bucket thinking they're not the reason for society's ails. But because of everybody's little drop in the bucket, we've created this amalgamation of instability, of reckless, generations. Like, growing up, I was constantly told that millennials are up their own rears and all this stuff. And it's like, who raised the millennials? I really think that that's what's going on, is the lack of job security has affected, it has a trickle down effect. Let me put it that way. The parents are constantly arguing, so therefore the kids are kind of absorbing that because, can't really hide the kids away from it all the time, and it just goes on from there. Same thing with marriage. We used to have a mom and a dad in the house. Now we have blended families where you got stepmom, stepdad, you got stepkids, you got half brother, half sisters, you got all these different instabilities at the home. And then you're wondering why your kids are all hyperactive and can't handle it. They're overstimulated all the time. Oh shoot, it's raining outside. Cool. Fantastic. Love the rain. We need it. Okay, I keep going on here. I'm sorry, this is taking way too long. Okay, the problem though is that Stansky's memo isn't so much a conversation as it is a rapid fire dictation of terms. True. He offers virtually no room for negotiation, dismissing his dissatisfied employees for lamenting disruption and telling them your professional expectations might be misaligned with the strategic direction of this company. In other words, get out. Yeah, that's essentially what I pulled from it. It's ironic that he wrote this in response to an engagement survey, which exists for the sole purpose of delivering workers' unvarnished feedback to executives. So what it boils down to is the dude can't handle criticism. That's really what this whole spat is over. The dude can't handle the fact that someone called him out. And now he's lashing out, and he just made it like abundantly clear, hey, you're not getting anything from us except for a paycheck. That's basically what he's saying. Okay, Mr. Stansky, message received. I'll never work for AT&T in my life. I worked as a contractor for AT&T, and they were the worst company to deal with. I'll never deal with them again. If I apply for another company and they tell me, "Oh, we deal with AT&T," I'll back out of the interview right then and there. I'll never deal with them again. That's just how awful they are. I am just all sorts of sassy today. You know what I mean? Woo! Get out of my way. Here comes Jack. Even more, there is remarkably little that Sansky offers employees in return for the commitment he asked from them. Of course not. He's a freaking taker. The things that he says employees can expect from the company, like a functional facility to work in, perhaps a reference to the lack of desks when AT&T brought everyone back into the office earlier this year, are so basic they're laughable. You're kidding me. They didn't even have enough desks for everyone? Oh, Jesus Christ. You deserve to have a desk to sit at in this office we forced you to back into is hardly a rallying cry. He's not giving managers any resources to motivate their employees. Again, it's AT&T. What does anyone expect? Says Denise Rizou, a professor of organizational behavior and public policy at Carnegie Mellon University. Here comes the experts, by the way. Just saying. Who coined the concept of the psychological contract. He isn't creating a new psychological contract. He's just ending the old one. And this is true. This seems like a death note in a way. The only real upside he offers to employees for the commitment he demands is continued employment. That's really what it boils down to. As long as AT&T's there, you'll more likely have a job unless you're laid off. In a memo filed with militaristic drill sergeant language, come on, shut up. He cites a quote from an army general that sounds like a veiled threat of unemployment. If you dislike change, you're going to dislike irrelevance even more. Wow, that's a hell of a quote to put on there. He's trying to scare employees into working hard. More and more CEOs are adopting the strategy of management by fear, emboldened by a white-collar recession that leaves disgruntled workers few places to go. That's interesting. That's very interesting. And if a few do leave, great. With AI allowing smaller teams to do more work, companies are trying to cull their headcounts anyways. Yes. There was that whole mass hiring during the COOF. They're cutting back from that. AI showed up. I got a whole conspiracy on that. We'll talk about that one day. It's funny how the people that stick around, their paychecks are not going to increase. They're going to have to do more work. AI is going to help with that work, obviously, which the AI is not going to take a paycheck. All that the AI is going to want is a server. Wow, just hit that mic. Sorry about that. Is a server and electricity. That's it. And more profits for everybody except for the employees. They may get a token bonus. Like, that's the one thing my company does is we have this little marketplace and we get bonus points every once in a while. So they give us these bonus points and we can go buy like a gift card or something. A lot of companies are doing that. We'd be lucky if we got a bonus. As I've written in a series of stories this year, this hardline approach backfires in all sorts of ways. Yes, it does. Even if the vast majority stay, the people who leave are typically the highest performers. Yes, because they have options. Second, if the white-collar job market eventually recovers, AT&T will risk a mass exodus at that point, which the CEO, Stansky, he's going to be gone by then anyways, and then the next guy is going to take the fall on that one. Everyone's going to forget about this. And most importantly, there's now decades of rigorous research showing how fear is a terrible way to get the best work from your employees. Faster work? Maybe. That's all they care about. And because people are interchangeable. They'll find some sucker to come in and, there's the whole term, the grass is always greener on the other side, comes into my thought process is, There's probably someone out there who works at a suckier company who's going to see AT&T as a step up. And then the cycle keeps spinning. But it'll be sloppier, less creative, and ultimately less innovative at a time when companies desperately need their teams to stay ahead in the age of AI. All these bigger companies have to do is buy out. That's it. They have to buy smaller companies. That's where the innovation comes from. It doesn't come from inside. It comes from smaller companies. And then they just buy the patents and sit on them. So don't give me that crap about innovation. There's no innovation. Stansky refers to management science in his memo. Jesus criminy. But he'd be smart to study up on what the management science actually shows. If he did, he would also find that there's virtually no empirical evidence to suggest that a fully in-person workplace performs any better than a hybrid. Shut up. Seriously, shut up. I get it. You want to be able to travel and work. Well, you know what? That's great. Find a job. I'm sick and tired of the argument of the work from home. If I have to do it, you have to do it. Okay? I'm sorry. I know that like some people are going to be like, oh, no, I don't like Jack saying that. It's just, to me, it's only fair. If everybody could work from home, great. But the janitor can't work from home. The freaking IT guy can't work from home. A lot of people can't work from home. So why should these people get to work from home? Honestly, what contribution do they give that allows them to work from home? This article writer, she shouldn't be allowed to work from home. All she does is write articles all day. I mean, hell, who's to say that she's not having ChatGPT write an article for her and then she edits it? Who's to say? I don't know. The risk Russo says is that other companies see Stancy heavy-handed attempt at rewriting or ripping up the psychological contract and feel emboldened to follow suit. All it takes is one. One person gives permission for the rest to follow suit. CEOs tend to copy each other. That's exactly what I said. And executives from Meta's Mark Zuckerberg to Uber's Dara, Alphabet, and Shopify's Tobias Lutke have all hinted in recent years that they're done trying to accommodate their employees. Oh, so the table tennis tables are going away. Fantastic. What makes Stansky's memo notable is that it could have come from any one of the CEOs atop our largest corporations today. Yes, this is true. If this is the direction corporate America is headed, that will make work less enjoyable, motivated, and meaningful for the vast majority of us, which will mean our employers will get less inspired work from us. If you don't like it, find a different place to work. I really hate to make these arguments. They're trite. They're tired. Like, it's pointless. Oh my God, there's more to this article. Holy hell. 30 minutes in. All right. Let's just continue on then. I'm sorry, guys. I shouldn't have gone on those tangents. That would have alarmed the Stanskys of the past, but maybe they think they don't need our inspired work. Not when AI is doing more and more of the coding, writing, coordinating, monitoring, and analysis that happens inside the business anyways. The thing about AI that these CEOs don't understand, and again, this is where the sales pitch is coming from. AI can only duplicate. They can't innovate. It may seem like innovation, but it's not. And then the other thing too is there still has to be someone checking the work, because at the bottom of ChatGPT it says ChatGPT often gets things wrong. Double check. So like I said, in 5 to 10 years, when this AI hype is gone, you're going to see a reckoning like you've never seen before, because the brain drain's just too far gone. I mean, is AI here to stay? Yeah, in some capacity. Is it where it's going to be right now? No. I would be shocked if it was worse than it is right now. And what I mean by worse is, like it's more intrusive. Like everyone's shoving AI into it, but I think that unless the models get really good, I think that there's going to be problems. It's just going to cost more money than it's worth. But the thing about these companies is they don't see the waste that happens on a daily basis. I don't know. We'll see. Because the larger the company, the bigger the bureaucracy. That's what it really boils down to. The employees who were once their most prized assets, their thinking goes, feel more like dead weight now. Good. I'm glad everyone is being treated like dead weight. Sentinel Circle's here. I treat everyone as a valued member of society. Doesn't matter if you're the janitor or the CEO. You are treated as a valued member. Which is probably why CEOs seem so comfortable now treating them with so little dignity and empathy. Okay. How many more paragraphs do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I'm going to read the rest of it, but it's probably pointless. It just seems like it's going into a rant about AI now. That's a mistake. In a world where AI makes workforces smaller, the potential impact for each employee expands, and that ends up raising, not lowering the stakes for attracting and retaining the very best people. It's a paradox the smartest minds in AI already recognize. I truly believe we can go super, super far without growing more. Oh my God. Kine Kantafursh. Oh my God. The CEO and founder of the software startup Workera, who also teaches a Stanford deep learning class, recently told me, but we need to have the world's absolute experts in what we do. I'm going to save this question for final thoughts, but I already got a question that I want to ask. Meta is doing that by throwing around 250 million pay packages. $250 million pay packages. Let's put it that way. Most companies can't afford that. No, they can't. Luckily for the non-metas, there's still a tried and true way to inspire great work. Give staff a compelling reason to make the effort. Yeah, that's true. AT&T once did that by taking care of its employees for life. Stansky was right to call it familial. It was a literal family for some, like the writer of this 1996 essay in the New York Times that I stumbled upon. Not only was this guy a longtime AT&T employee who has risen from the ranks of a software testing temp, but he was the son of 2 AT&T employees whose sister and brother-in-law also worked for the company. He was a proud AT&T brat. At every turn, his father urged him to stick with the company. To him, the company wasn't a job, it was a way of life. Back then, that's how it was. Not anymore. In today's economy, the enticements will probably need to be different from the cradle to grave. From the cradle to grave care these businesses once promised. Fixing our fractured world of work starts with figuring out what those enticements will be, so we can forge the psychological contract of this new era. Corporate America can't demand commitment without offering its workers an equal commitment in return. That just doesn't work. It's right. There has to be give and take. And right now it just seems like it's take and not give. Unlike machines, human workers don't perform just because we're told to. Yes. As companies go about this work, a good place to start would be the very employee surveys that inspired Stansky's memo. Stansky looked at the drop in engagement and saw a bunch of complainers. What he missed was the hope buried beneath their discontentment. Some 99,000 workers cared enough to respond. Yeah. And many of them voiced their frustration because they believe AT&T could once again be a place they'd be thrilled to give their best work to. Underlying that hope is one message. It's not too late. Okay, that was an ordeal. I apologize because, I kind of caused that. How far are we into this? 40 minutes. That's not too bad. It's still on the longer end, but I'm going to talk about this. Sorry, I get long-winded and then I get thirsty. And I'm getting thirsty right now. So, let's go to break. We'll come back with your comments and then we will discuss this article. But I got a feeling this is going to be one of those articles that sticks with me for life. So we'll be back. And we're back. Thank you for sticking with us. I appreciate it. Excuse me. So, first comment from the Dark Cell. Always good to hear from Dark Cell. He's a good guy. I like him. I don't see the majority of the newer generations living up to that age anyways. I mean, why would you when retirement isn't going to be an option for the average millennial Gen Zer? And unfortunately to say, many will retire, quote unquote, in their own way if you get my gist. I definitely don't want to be isolated at age 50-something with no prospects in my life, no friends, wife, family, etc. What a waste of time. Most of us are going to go out, quote unquote, in our own way. And this is kind of the inherent problem I see. And I chose this comment specifically for this video because a lot of us, and I don't agree with it. I really don't. But a lot of us derived our purpose from our jobs. And now we're being told that we're not expected to, well, be treated like an equal at our job anymore. We're treated as interchangeable parts. So if you're treated like an interchangeable part there and you're not really got anything else going on in your life, what else is there? Well, I know for me, I'm trying to build Sentinel Circle up. That's my purpose in life now. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that's just kind of aimlessly floating around out there, doing whatever. They got nothing going on. They have to find something. Like I said, for me, that's Sentinel Circle. That's the reason why I get up in the morning. That's the reason why I go to sleep at night. That's the reason why I do what I do. You know, I'm fully dedicated to this, and I really wish I had done this 10 years ago. There's a saying, it's a Buddhist saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So the moral of that is, okay, we can all sit here and wonder, okay, well, yeah, we could have done all this 20 years ago. But we can't dwell on the past. The past is the past. We have to get up and we have to get going today. You know, I know the odds of me going as far as I want to go with Sentinel Circle is probably next to nil. I'm trying to build a future that I myself may never participate in. But that being stated, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing. You know, in Dark Knight Rises, Bane sits there and says that the reason why the pit is the worst prison in the world is because of hope. You know, hope is a poison to some people. You know, I'm not saying don't have hope and just give up and walk away, but it's more... The way I see it, and this is probably what's going on here, is the way I see it is, what else am I got going on? You know, I mean, I get up, I go to work, I come home, do nothing, go to bed and do that for 30 years. No, my mind could not handle that. You know, there's another option, which is I get up and I go to work and then I go work a second job and I come home and go to sleep and do that again. Yeah, I could do that, make as much money as I want. There's going to be a video that we discuss. Well, actually, I'm going to discuss it in my musings video for this week soon. Why I don't think that that's a good idea, but that's an entirely possible option. You know, look, the world is a vast place. Yeah, we're not in space. You can't just like go find your Chewbacca and get into your Millennium Falcon and go do space pirate stuff. You can't do that. But you can do a lot in our world. Does it take money? Yeah, it takes money. It's unfortunate. But if you live in a very uncomfortable life, you can be whatever person you want. You know? And like I said, that I've learned that a little too late. I learned that in order to have an amazing life, I have to be uncomfortable. And I've built my whole life around comfort. And I realized that was not the way to go. But I'm making that change and making a very conscious change. And that's part of me moving into this new apartment, is so I can make that change. I'm going to cull about 80% of my stuff, and I'm going to start planning I don't know, like just a place for myself and a place for men. I don't know how that's going to look. I don't know yet, but I'm going to try it, because again, I'm going to be 40 regardless, but do I want to be 40 doing the exact same thing I'm doing in my 30s? Or do I want to be 40 doing like really cool and awesome stuff? At some point you got to take the gamble. You lose, okay, great, you lost. But I rather live knowing that I lost rather than wondering would I have won. So anyways, it was a good comment, Dark Cell. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I just want you to know that I do see you as a friend. So you'll at least have one friend. Next comment. London Lad. Yes, dear, we are royally screwed. Thank you, London. I appreciate it. Nick. It's always good to hear from Nick. Man, time has been flying by. I didn't even know it was Thursday. And this was about a live stream. We've since stopped doing live streams. But, hey, man, if you make it, great. If not, it's always saved. You can go look at it. Oh, God. Okiphobic misanthrope. I recognize this name. Says here, you are very refreshing. It's great to listen to someone talk about the problems and not point fingers at people. I'm sorry to say I might have a few answers that might change that. Well, I'm always open to different ideas and interpretations. So lay it on me. And in terms of not pointing fingers at people, I do point fingers at people. I point fingers at me. Okay? I point fingers at like basically everybody, because at the end of the day, everybody's the problem. The reason why we're in the position right now, and I'm going to talk about this in a future video, is a lot of people don't fight back. I know why they don't. They don't see the effort. But there's a famous poem from an H survivor. First they came after what was it? The political dissidents, and I didn't say anything because I wasn't a political dissident. And then they came after the gypsies and the J words, tiny hats, so on and so forth. And then they're like, then they came after me, and nobody was left to speak up for me. Same deal. We don't speak up, and then like we're surprised when eventually it happens to us. But at the same time, like, there's so much going on in the world. How can you keep up? I don't know. Anyways, it's good to hear from you, Okaphobic. Thank you. And Overlord of Ecchi, something like that. There was no mistake. The system demanded a culprit and was given one. The data isn't collected for justice. And this was in the whole video about person got accused of theft, even though they weren't. It was obvious they weren't stealing. It was AI said that they were stealing. And this is, again, the problem with AI systems, is everyone's going to take it at their word. Even though AI has been shown time and time again to make a lot of mistakes. Nobody's going to do their job to verify. And this woman, she was banned for quite a while because of the mistake of the system. And it's embarrassing. It really is, but nobody corrected the mistake until like there was a lot of pressure to correct the mistake. What happens if that happens to you, my friend? What are you going to do? Are you just going to say, oh, screw it? Or are you going to defend your honor? Well, that's the whole point in this. Anyways, I think that's the last, yeah, that's the last comment. So let's go ahead. Cut to my handsome face. Always good to see my friends. So, AT&T and all this stuff. Well, for one is this guy. The reason why this is so shocking to me is two things. One is it's coming from a CEO, which they, like it or not, they hold a lot of sway. They do. The second aspect of this, and this is what really should bother a lot of people, is now that permission's been granted because he said something, you're going to see this a lot more with your companies. And the fact that this happened during one of those surveys saying, okay, well, how are we doing as your bosses and stuff? Because every company does that, where they'll ask the employees, how do you think things are going, all that stuff, and they kind of aggregate it and determine if they're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. It's pointless, but it's nice to be able to tell management without fear of retaliation, hey, you're a bunch of freaking morons. But the fact that this memo came from that is, quite frankly, horrifying. Because what that tells me is now we can't even criticize management, at least within AT&T. I suspect that's going to happen in other places too. Granted, I don't work at a Fortune 500 company, but I could see my company doing that. I could see a lot of companies doing that. And that should concern everybody. And the fact now that, like, he said it himself, we're going from a familial to a market-based employment structure. What that tells me is we are now commodities. We as in employees. I've always said that, and I say these things like I'm 100 years old. I'm not. I'm just some 30-something-year-old guy in his freaking, well, I'm on the second floor of my apartment, but, that's me. But it might as well be a basement. But what I'm getting at is we're commodities now. I've always been told that the one thing that we have oodles of that we sell on a daily basis is two things. One is our expertise, right? You have to get your expertise in order to be employable, right? Because if the whole point is like anybody can go flip a burger at Burger King, allegedly. I've tried it. I burnt myself. It doesn't work. But allegedly, that's like, so easy and common that any idiot and their mother can do it. Okay. But so I can't go do like neurosurgery. I would screw that person up. It would be horrible. You go through years and decades of training just to be able to go snip, snip, snip in someone's brain. That's why they get paid the big bucks. So obviously, your education, your experience, whatever. That's the one thing people buy. The other thing that people buy is your time, because your time is not infinite. It's finite. If you had all that education, but nobody wants to buy your time, then all that education is worthless to begin with. It's also the same thing. Like, they sit there and say that, well, what do they call a D student in med school? Doctor. Well, same principle. Everybody wants the best of the best medical care. That's why they're able to charge the premium prices. So then obviously, if you can't afford that, you go down and down and down until you hit the D student in med school. There was that whole incident in Texas with Dr. Death. The dude basically crippled a bunch of people because he was so awful at being a doctor. And yet he was allowed to keep his medical license. He's still a doctor. Well, not anymore, but at the time when that scandal happened, he was still a doctor. Oh, my nose is itchy. So, but again, finite time. So that's what companies are doing when they buy you. And that's really what employment is buying you. And I went on that whole rant about how, my company feels that they can tell me what I can and can't do in my off time. Well, in a way they can. If they don't like what I do in my off time, they can easily fire me and say I don't represent the company. Right? Well, yeah, they can do that. I can also, quote unquote, fire my company by quitting. The only difference is they can find someone to replace me like that, whereas me, it's going to take me a while to find employment because there's more people than there are companies. That's just a fact of the market. Any idiot, I don't mean to talk down about myself, but any idiot can do my job. That's just a straight fact. Like, I do very mechanical work, but we've seen time and time again that, like, you can easily just show up and start unscrewing things and make something work. It just takes time to train and all that stuff. I honestly think that this is the start of a reckoning. AI, I think, has overblown the whole situation. They're calling this the fourth industrial revolution, which we when we talk about industrial revolutions, we're actually talking about the second industrial revolution. And a lot of people don't know that. But there's actually 4 industrial revolutions. You have, I don't remember what the first one was, but the second one was automation, or not automation, but steam engines and assembly and all that. That's the one that we traditionally think of. And then you have the third industrial revolution, which was internet. And then the fourth one is automation, AI, all that stuff. I think that automation, that was, and it's funny because I work in automation. Automation was not good. I used to be one of those guys that's like, I enjoy using the self-checkout simply because I can get through it faster than standing in line at the grocery store and doing that. The problem with that kind of situation is it's ripe for abuse. And I honestly believe in the future that, and it's funny, this isn't my idea. This was an idea that a friend came up with. Just to go into the store, you're going to have to pay money. That's what's going to happen. Is every store is, in order to go into the store to buy stuff, like physically walk into the store to buy stuff, it's going to be a membership, similar to Costco, Sam's Club, BJ's, whatever store you want to go at. That's going to be the main thing. And then the second main thing is if you don't want to pay that, then you're going to have to order your groceries online, go to the store, pick it up. That's the future. Because people are going to pay a premium to be able to walk into the store and shop. Whereas the people who aren't willing to pay the premium, they're going to have to pay the fee to go pick it up, right? It's going to be like a small token fee. Or that's just going to be the default. And then if you want to deliver it to your house, that's going to be the fee, whether you buy from DoorDash or whatever. That's the future. And that directly affects my industry because, again, I work on things like self-checkouts and other things like that. So that directly impacts my ability to function in society. The question that nobody has asked yet is what's going to happen when all these people are not employable? Because at the speed of things going right now, there's going to be too many big businesses and not enough small businesses. And we've heard time and time again, the one thing that drives the American economy is small business. Well, it's getting harder and harder to open up a small business. And what I mean by that is like a little grocery store. It's easy to start your own business, quote unquote. You just need a business license, and depending on the state, it's as cheap as $10. $10 and an address. Easy peasy, right? But if you want to own a grocery store or a car wash or something, you got to follow all those regulations and pay all those other businesses to buy their products so you can open up a whatever. It's getting harder and harder to do that, is what I'm getting at. And with the advent of AI and all that stuff, all these bigger businesses, they're going to replace people. You know, they sit there and say they're not, but that's what it boils down to. You know, I go into a lot of the places that I service, and half these places are ghost towns now. You know, I mean, yeah, they have a footprint. That's the whole point of having that footprint there. But who's to say that all those people are not going to be replaced by machines? And maybe there's one person in there to help if the machine can't help the person. You know, like some of the checkout lines. You go into the store and they have all these checkout lines. Like, 20, 30 of them up front. How many of them are open? It's usually 2. And then you have the self-checkout section, which, most stores, if they're smart, they limit it to 20 items or less. That's how it should be. But they're slowly adding like belted units so that way you can avoid that. And then there's one person watching the belted units. So now you took the job of 2 people, condensed it down to 1, and all they do is watch. So my question again is, what happens to those people who can't do those jobs, or who lose their jobs to that? Because again, it just seems like we're constantly talking about job growth, but the problem is I don't see it. I don't see these jobs growing. I see gig jobs growing, and I think that that's the future of employment. Is everyone's going to be a contractor in the future? Because with contractors, you don't have to pay benefits. The contractor has to pay his own benefits. You just give them some token money and all that stuff. Like I work DoorDash and Uber Eats in my off time sometimes to make some extra money, which that's how you should be using it. But some of the terms, like, it's obvious that they, you can't really afford it. It's a way to keep people super impoverished and make them think that they're earning money. And I can't begin to tell you how many times I order and it's someone who can't speak English. And I'm not hating on immigrants or whatever. It's just, it makes coordination so difficult sometimes. Like, I mean, I go to like places like Big Arches, and if I need to talk to the person because I'm doing a job there, I need a translator at this point. One of the younger employees has to come and translate for the manager because the manager can't speak English. Like, legit cannot speak English. I really think we got a problem. And that I will say that doing this YouTube channel has been a blessing in a way, because before I saw the problem, but I didn't really see the problem. Now that I've dug into it, I've done my research and stuff, we got a big freaking problem. I really think that we have a reckoning coming, and soon. And I'm not saying that for clickbait. I'm not saying that to get views, subs, whatever. No, I truly in my heart of hearts believe that. And I'm of the mind that I need to do something. And I've talked about building like some kind of little group or something to help with that. And I really do think that that's the way, because I honestly think that hyper individualism has wrecked society. I'm not saying that it's hyper individualism is bad, but like, we're of the opinions that we have to do everything for ourselves or contract out. Because let me put it to you this way: when you go out to a restaurant to go buy food, or a meal, I should say, you're kind of contracting out that job. Because if you don't eat at a restaurant, well, you eat at home. Well, there's 2 options there. You can either cook your own food, right? Which means you got to cook, or you got to prep, cook, and then clean your environment. Or you can go down to the grocery store and get something that's pre-made, which again, that's contracting out. When you buy a meal ready to eat, you just got to heat it. That's contracting out the job, right? When you go buy something at the deli, someone else made that food, that's contracting out the job. And then you just go home, you put it on your plate, you eat, and then you took care of the prep and the cooking, and now all you got to do is the cleanup. Unless you got someone to clean for you, then you're contracting out. So that's kind of the whole point of hyper-individualism, is your goal is to make as much money as possible, so therefore you can contract out these different jobs. I'm not judging that one bit. I've contracted out many a labor in the past. Like HelloFresh is just a way to contract out the shopping and in some cases the prep work for cooking. Nothing wrong with that. Because again, I don't particularly enjoy grocery shopping. It drives me nuts. That's why I use meal systems like HelloFresh, so that way I don't have to worry about that stuff. I've since stopped doing that because like it's just cheaper for me. But again, you're trading the money aspect for the time aspect. And that's why I think a group is kind of good, because you can have that all in house. Like if you got like a big enough place, right, and then you had one person that was doing the cooking and all that stuff, and then like all the labor was shared, like, yeah, okay, you trade that space, but you're getting labor out of the deal. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that that's for everybody. I'm just saying that that's kind of the direction I'm thinking. I'm not going to sit there and tell anybody how to live. But that's kind of my whole point, is it's all trade-offs. There's no such thing as a solution, only trade-offs. But I really think that that's where the hyper-individualism is because, again, a lot of people make money off of it. That's why it's pushed so hard. Because, again, if people weren't making money off of it, they wouldn't be pushing it so hard. The whole, you could get rich by doing this, and you look rich by doing this, and all that stuff. Everyone's trying to make a buck. And that's really what it boils down to. And like I said, the CEO basically let the cat out of the bag. He says that, look, we're not here to coddle you. You're here to get a paycheck. We'll give you a paycheck for your labor. That's it. And I guarantee you that if he could get away without paying people, he would do it. Because at the end of the day, that's what it boils down to. They know that you're screwing them. They're going to try and screw you as well. And it's just a constant game of who screws who more. And it drives me freaking nuts. And I'm at 30 minutes, so I'm going to end right there. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. If you liked what you saw, be sure to like and subscribe and do all those things. And again, I'm on Discord. I'm going to promote Discord quite heavily. Please watch us or come to Discord and join us there. Okay. In fact, I may start streaming on Discord, just for people who are there. I don't know yet. I haven't decided. It'd be interesting. Anyways, I hope you have a great day. I'll talk to you later. Bye.